Welcome back to another episode of Direct Edition. I'm your host, Dave, the guy with the voice that you're listening to
right now.
All right, everybody. It's nice to see you again, and I hope everybody's doing well. It's Saturday, May 25th, and that would mean it's Memorial Day weekend, and that got me in a reflective state. Now, I had written some stuff down on some Post-its, but I think I'm going to tell a story, one that most people that know me currently, they don't know the details of it. A lot of people don't know it at all. And something that I've never spoken about publicly since I've had this microphone. I want to talk about my hobbies before this, some fun stuff that I got involved in, when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And that's kind of where this one falls today. This story is going to be about pro wrestling. I think no matter what, even if you're not a pro wrestling fan, I think this is something that'll interest you because it's a very, very wild and exciting story. Without further ado, why don't we get into it? How about that? Back in the 80s, obviously, I grew up watching, WWF, Saturday Night Main Event, and the pay-per-views and WrestleMania. I'm pretty sure my parents took me to WrestleMania 2, which was in 3 places, and one of them was Nassau Coliseum. I have a program from WrestleMania, and my brother says that he doesn't think we were there, but I'm pretty sure we were there. I guess I could ask my parents. But I grew up in the era of Hogan and King Kong Bundy and Randy Macho Man Savage and Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov and Big John Studd. I had all the giant Vulcan rubber LJN wrestling figures, and I was just wildly crazy about it. The WWE superstars, the Saturday morning cartoon, and it was just everything. But in time, it kind of faded away from my life. I liked the Ultimate Warrior. I really liked Bret Hart, but there was that gap between maybe let's just say 90 to 95 that I didn't really watch. I kept up a little bit on it. I played the video games, so I knew a lot of the wrestlers, but I can honestly say the era of the rise of Shawn Michaels was probably the era I wasn't watching. I think I started getting back into it when the Bret Hart Screwjob happened, and Stone Cold, and then Stone Cold comes into the fray, and the Attitude Era begins, and I was fully engrossed by probably 96, 97 again, as I was getting out of high school and going into college. That began the biggest wrestling fandom era of my life. It's because of the Attitude Era. It's because of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then you start to hear rumblings of WCW and NWO. Because wrestling was always a territorial thing. It isn't so much anymore, but it was. And I don't know too much about the intricacies of all of the territories going back to the NWA days and all these, the Von Erichs and stuff like that. I wasn't old enough to know anything about that at the time. I've learned some since, but WCW's territory, and once again, I'm using the knowledge I have. A lot of this is just kind of based off of my experience versus the textbook knowledge of all of the things WCW and WWF territory-wise. To my knowledge, WCW never had a televised event in Long Island, and I'm pretty sure they never had one in New York City, at least in that late 90s period. I think they might have had a house show at Madison Square Garden, but apparently Vince McMahon had signed exclusive deals with a lot of the arenas in the New York City metro area. So you weren't seeing them if you were a Long Islander or Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, so on and so forth. They were in the Northeast in places like Rhode Island and I guess maybe, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. But I started getting really into it with my friends. I think we went to some events at Nassau Coliseum that were WWE. I went to SummerSlam 98 at Madison Square Garden. It was my first year of college, and I only went away 1 year to University of Hartford, and I think it was after that year, so it would have been early summer 98, or maybe it was early spring 98. I went with my friend Derek, who was my autograph pal. We used to get hockey autographs at Nassau Coliseum, and that's a story for another day. Because of the knowledge that we had with the hockey autographs, we thought, and we did, figure out the hotel that the wrestlers were staying at when they were in Providence for the pay-per-view. And so we got tickets to the pay-per-view. We booked a hotel at the same hotel that they were staying at with the idea of like, we're hotel guests. They probably won't kick us out even if we're getting photos with wrestlers. And we were right. They didn't. This was before cell phones were everywhere. And before, way before like TMZ or anything like that. So hotels not in main cities like New York or LA, they didn't really care if people got autographs or photos with the wrestlers and stuff like that. So we spent the weekend meeting pretty much everybody in WCW. I think the only person that weekend that me and Derek didn't meet was the Ultimate Warrior. I don't even think we saw him. But I have photos from that weekend, and I'm 17 years old, with Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, everybody in the WCW at that time. Sting, names are escaping me. The big ones. I just named them all. Thus began my absolute fandom with wrestling because all of them are nice. I have a photo, and it's me sandwiched in between Hogan and Savage. And it's the coolest fucking thing. And when I was 17, I looked like I was 14. So you're going to see that and be like, that's Dave. This was just this awesome thing. And I enjoyed doing it just as much as I enjoyed meeting hockey players, getting autographs from hockey players and other athletes. And so that was the summer. Yeah, that would have been the summer of 98. Or it could have been beginning of 98, but whatever. Speaking of 1998, what a year. I was done with college. I never went back to Hartford. I think I'd just gotten a job at Subway near where I grew up. I got a couple of friends' jobs there, and, it turned into this, just like all of my friends worked at Subway. But anyway, WCW, and I don't know how it happened. This might be something that's worth researching for somebody that's interested in knowing, or maybe there's a documentary about it. I don't know. Summer of 98, the dam broke, and WCW booked their first event at Nassau Coliseum on Long Island, and it was a Monday Night Nitro. And that was big news because they had never, to my knowledge, at least in my lifetime, had ever had an event at Nassau Coliseum, had never had a Nitro at Nassau Coliseum or in New York for that matter. And Nassau Coliseum is basically where I spent a lot of my youth, the New York Islanders' home, and a place that I would cut school to go get autographs. I would go to games for $12 or $13 when the Islanders were in some of their worst years. It was my playground. And so immediately as tickets went on sale, I'm like, I'm getting tickets. And I think 4 of us went to Nitro. This is a tough memory because I remember being there, but I don't remember how many of us went together. But it was in June of 1998. And it was Monday Night Nitro. You can look that up. And we went, and it was great. It was fucking awesome. It was amazing. The way that the Nassau Coliseum is situated, the Coliseum is in a big parking lot, and across the parking lot is the Marriott Hotel. Now, the Marriott Hotel is the hotel that most, 80% of the hockey teams, 85% of the hockey teams would stay at when they were playing the Islanders. I'm sure back in the 80s and the 70s, and probably even into the 90s, every band that played at Nassau Coliseum stayed at the Marriott. I was part of a crew of people that collected autographs there in the 90s, and we watched it go from being 12 or 15 people there for teams, or 10 people, to 30 or 40 as word got out. I don't know how word got out, but anyway, me and my friends, it was probably Derek and Kenny, I don't know who else was with us. We were like, okay, let's go over to the Marriott and see who's staying there. Wrestlers are staying there. That's a no-brainer. Yeah, well, about 150 other people thought that was a good idea too. So this was wild. We walk into the hotel and it's just like a crowd of hundreds of people there. But we figured we'd wait around. Now, what was really cool is I noticed there was a couple other people talking to somebody, and I look over and it's fucking Sebastian Bach, lead singer of Skid Row. He's become a TV personality. He was on Gilmore Girls, but and most of you are going to know him as the lead singer of Skid Row, one of the greatest voices to come out of the 80s, if not the greatest pure voice out of the 80s, with such hits as 18 Life, I Remember You, their second album, Slave to the Grind, Monkey Business, Get the Fuck Out. We went over to talk to him, and actually his friend, who drove him to to see the wrestling show, to go to the show, his car broke down. I guess they had to get somebody to jump it. And so he was just hanging out, talking to fans and stuff. And most people were just, getting his autograph and moving along. But they went to go outside. So he's like, yeah, come follow us outside and we'll, I'll take pictures or whatever and sign autographs. And I just told him, I said, my first CD that I ever bought, not my first record or tape, my first CD I ever bought was when Slave to the Grind came out. And I told him that was like, I played that album every day that summer. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, what's your favorite song? I'm like, come on, like, get the fuck out. And I'm like, I don't know how it started, but we both started singing it at the same time. It was this fucking pure moment. And he's such a nice guy. I've met him multiple times and he's always really enthusiastic, but I still have it. I have an index card somewhere in a box over here that's signed, Get the Fuck Out, Sebastian Bach. So that was really cool. So we went back into the hotel after that, and that crowd had dissipated a little bit, but not that much. I mean, there was still 100-something people in there. And so the way that it was set up, there's like the front of the hotel had like a parking circle, like you drive in and you drop off your bags or, whatever, check in, and then you go to the parking lot after. And then there was these 2 sliding doors for the main entrance. You walk in and the front desk is to the right, the bar is to the left, and there's, obviously a lobby seating area. Now, this story, if you go read this on the internet, there's actually one thing wrong. The incident, and what I'm about to tell you about, did not happen at the bar. It happened at the front desk. So some wrestlers come in and security was just trying to keep everybody away from the front desk, like asking people, let them check in. If they want to come over and take photos or sign autographs, wait until they're done checking in. That's pretty courteous. That's like standard, being a respectful person. You're dealing with wrestling fans, so, not the brightest bunch, not the most courteous bunch, and probably not the most sober bunch. I was 18 at the time. I didn't turn 19 until the end of the year. So I wasn't drinking. I didn't start drinking until many years later. But I can't tell you that anybody else wasn't drinking. So a couple of wrestlers came in, but the kind of biggest shock, the biggest excitement, or to use a wrestling term, the biggest pop came from when Kevin Nash, who was formerly known in the WWE as Diesel, came in with the Giant, aka Paul Wight, who after that will be known as the Big Show. You may know Paul Wight. He was in Adam Sandler's The Waterboy as the famous Captain Insano. Jingle All the Way as the gigantic Santa. He was on SNL when The Rock was on. He had a show on Netflix that was like a family show called The Big Show Show. He's been in a lot of movies. He's been in a lot of TV. He is 7'2", and, at the time he was like 380 pounds. It's funny, when he came into the WCW, they kind of build it like he was Andre the Giant's son because he has giantism. So he's an abnormally large human. So they walk into the hotel, and Kevin Nash is no slouch. I think he's like close to 7 foot tall as well. And they go to check in. It was really crowded. It was really loud. I was standing close enough to have seen everything that happened. I was not standing close enough to hear every word that was said. But some Yahoo started walking up to Kevin Nash and talking to him, and I couldn't hear what was being said. And he walked up to Big Show, to Paul. I couldn't really hear what was being said, but I could read the body language, and because both Kevin Nash and Paul are very big humans, their voices are very deep, and I clearly heard Paul say, "Hey, just let me check in, give me a moment." And this guy kept yapping to him, and he Paul said something to him like, "Come on, man, just stop." And then it turned into this dude wildly yelling and cursing and saying something like, once again, this happened 25 years ago. So remembering every word is kind of hard. But I remember Paul saying that, and this guy's like, "Oh, Kevin Nash was cool and he said hi to me, but Big Show's an asshole. He won't even talk to me." And it's like, everybody was just like, "What's going on?" Like, it all happened so quick. And this guy started yelling, and so Paul turns around and basically asks him to just stop cursing and stop. He's just like, "Just stop." There's people here, there's kids here, whatever. And this guy said something else and gets up into Paul's face. Now, the guy, whose name is Robert Sawyer, he got into his face. This guy, Robert Sawyer, was probably about 6'3", 6'4". So against somebody like me, he's taller and he's actually a big dude. Against somebody like Paul, doesn't matter. Nobody's going to measure up except maybe Kevin Nash. And it all happened so quick. But this dude, I could see this dude. He made a move to push, like double hand push him in the chest, to push Paul Wight in the chest, which didn't move him. And Paul just cocked him right in the face. The punch was lightning fast. He didn't put much into it because he is a large wall of a man. But he punched this dude, and this dude went flying back about 6 feet. It was like something out of a movie. Like when you see a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie and he just one kick and the dude goes flying and the crowd just like parts like the Red Sea. And so that's what happened. This guy got up and just took off because there's two ways out of the Marriott. You can go through the back entrance, which is towards Nassau Coliseum where we came in originally, or you can go out the front way, which is where you would come in if you were checking in via car or getting dropped off by the airport. And everybody was like, oh, I think to most of us, we thought it was some type of work. We thought it was a gimmick, like it was some bullshit, except the fact that panic set in and people were like losing their minds. And it was very quick that I at least I feel like it was very quick. The cops were there. And that guy had taken off. I don't remember where I guess Paul and Kevin Nash went up to their rooms, or maybe they went off to somewhere else, like with the hotel people. Yeah, me and my friends everybody got cleared out. They weren't letting anybody stay in the hotel unless they had a card, a room key. And I think what they were doing is like, either you got to go to your room or you got to go to the bar. You can't stay in the lobby right now if you were a guest. And so we got out of there. We all left, and it was like the craziest shit we had ever seen. Now, this is 98, so the internet's in its infancy. Social media does not exist. There is no such thing. MySpace doesn't exist yet. So this news doesn't spread. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe there was a news story about it. And that was it. We had nothing else to really go on. There was no news of it. For all I know, he never even was arrested. So flash forward to August of 98. And me and Kenny and Derek. Okay, so Kenny and Derek definitely weren't there. And that's why I'm remembering this part of the story. Me, Kenny, and Derek went up to Hartford, Connecticut to go see WCW. I think there was a Nitro. Maybe there was a pay-per-view and a Nitro. Either way, we went up to Hartford to go see the show. But we also, once again, knew what we were doing. The Sheraton Hotel, which was attached to the Hartford Civic Center, was where all the hockey teams would normally stay because it's literally attached to the arena. So we figured, okay, let's stay there. The wrestlers are probably going to stay there. And sure enough, they all stayed there. Met Sting there, got a photo with him without his face paint on. Ultimate Warrior was still an asshole. Me, Kenny, and Derek have photos of us with Scott Hall doing the suck it, the Degeneration X, the crotch chop thing. And so it was great. We met all the wrestlers. So we were sitting there, and there is these two, let's just call them Dennis. I'm just going to say his name's Dennis because his name is Dennis. I won't describe him. But he was an autograph collector. He liked to meet the wrestlers. He was like us. He would stay in the same hotels. He was a nice guy. I didn't want to hang around with him. Paul comes and checks in. We're just kind of standing around, and after he's done checking in, he sees us and he comes over just to, he knows photos and autographs. Like, he was no stranger to it. And Dennis pulls out a photo to get signed, and he never got any 8x10 signed or anything. It was always like 4x6 photos that he took with his camera. It's kind of endearing. I did that too. And it just so happened to be a photo that was taken right after Paul punched that dude in the face. Like, right after. I'm pretty sure his fist might have actually just been recoiling. Something like that. And Paul says something. We're all standing there. And Paul says something like, what photo is this? He's like, oh, Dennis, like, this is right after you punch that guy in the Marriott. And Paul lit up. And he's like, you were there? And he's like, yeah, I took the photo. And I said, and I chime in. I was like, I was there too. He's like, wait, you two were there? I was like, yeah, I saw the whole thing happen. And he's like, oh my God. All right. And we go to sit down at like a couch table thing. He's like, look, they cleared that hotel lobby out so quick that we don't, and the cops came, we don't have any witnesses. He was like super happy. He's like, we have nobody that came forward that said they saw it happen as it happened. And I'm like, yeah, I was standing right there and Dennis is clearly right there. He took the photo. And he's like, look, he's like, I got to take your name and your number and I got to give your name and numbers to my lawyer. And he's going to give you a call. We're going to need statements and witnesses and stuff. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like not even 19 yet. And Pro Wrestler is asking me to help him out when I saw what happened. Of course. It's a no-brainer. And so he was like super grateful. He's like, thanks again. And my lawyer will be in touch. We had a great time in Hartford. Now, this is where the dates get a little wonky for me. So this is August of 98. Sometime between August of 98 and let's say February of 1999, I get a call from Brian Davis, who was his lawyer. And I'm using real names because all of this is literally documented in court and in media. Brian Davis, his lawyer, calls me at home. Still living with my parents. We talked on the phone for a little bit and he's like, look, I'm going to have a private investigator come to your house. We're going to set up a date and he's going to take your full statement and your recount of everything that happened that night. I said, sure. Once again, 18, 19 years old, in love with wrestling, and I have a chance to be a part of this. Of course. And so I don't remember when it was, but they came to take my statement sometime in, I think it was in 98. And private investigator sat with me for about 2 hours. And, it was interesting. He wasn't grilling me like the cops would, but he told me he had to ask me questions as if he was the defense attorney for this guy, Robert Sawyer. There were some questions he's like, are you sure this, and I don't remember the specifics. I just remember feeling a little uncomfortable at points, but I knew, he warned me that it'd be that way. And so he took the statement and he's like, this is great. He's like, your statement matches with everything else that we've been told. There is security footage from the hotel lobby, which you can actually see online. But, I think they said that the law is that hotels aren't allowed to record sound and picture. So they only record picture. And so it's a black and white, once again, 1998, security footage. I mean, security cameras aren't even that good anyway these days. You see that shit on the news and it's like, fuck are they recording with a iPhone 1? So they had security footage of the incident, but there's no audio. And when Paul turns around and eventually punches him, you clearly can't see much of what's going on except a hulking mass throwing a punch. But he's like, yeah, this is pretty much matching up to everything that we have, the tidbits. And then I guess it matched up to Dennis's story. Obviously it did because we were both there. I think we were just like 15 feet away from each other on a, like he was on one side, I was on the other side. In this time, Paul ends up leaving WCW and there were rumors, and I think I actually knew this beforehand. Maybe that's why I knew this, is that he signed with WWE. He comes into WWE in, I want to say it was February of 1998, and I want to say the pay-per-view was St. Valentine's Day Massacre or something like that. And he comes up from under the ring and all this stuff. But I had already known that it was going to trial in March of 1999. And the court case happened in early March of 99. Now, before this, I had met with Paul and we went out to dinner on Long Island. And he just wanted to make sure that like I was okay with this. Like I think, Dennis was older than me. I want to say Dennis was in his probably 30s, maybe his late 20s, where I'm not even 21 yet. And so I think Paul just wanted to make sure, like, is this kid okay being on the jury? Is he, on the stand and possibly being in the spotlight? And so he took me out to dinner. He was really nice, very much like a older brother type nice. And he's like, look, he's like, after the trial, as long as I still have a job, I'll always take care of you if you need tickets or anything like that. I was like, oh, that's great. I was like, this is the craziest shit that's ever happened to me. But yeah, we went out to dinner at a diner on Hempstead Turnpike in Long Island, and I watched him order a half a gallon of milk to drink with his meal. It's one of the fucking most impressive things I've ever seen in my life. The trial, I was brought into the stand on the second day of the trial, I believe. Yeah. But the guy, Sawyer, who suffered a broken jaw from that punch, he only was in court day one. I don't know why. I maybe they told me, but I don't think they did. All I know is I testified the second day and he wasn't there. I went there the third day. They threw the case out. He was not guilty because it was self-defense. And the judge explained it. It's like, it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are. If somebody goes to assault you and you punch them in self-defense and there's witnesses that testify against that, you don't have a leg to stand on or a jaw to stand on. But the case lasted 3 days and he was acquitted. The case was thrown out. I was in the newspaper, which was really cool. I was in Newsday and I'm holding a copy of the article. I kept all the articles and I made photocopies, but I'm just going to read this. The headline says, giant wrestler, and there's a colon, he was afraid, tells court he hit in self-defense. And if you watch Paul talk about it on the news, you could watch that on YouTube. Oh, this guy Sawyer was 6'6" and 224 pounds. So he was a giant compared to me. But anyway, 2 defense witnesses, fans who had crowded the lobby that night to catch a glimpse of the wrestlers, also said they saw Sawyer attempt to shove Wight. Witness David Wreslter, 19, of Deer Park, said Sawyer was, quote, right up in his face, goading him to fight before shoving him with both hands. And then they write, prior to that, had Paul Wight made any aggressive actions? Asked Wight's attorney, Brian Davis of the law firm. And I said, no, because it's true. He was talking to him, but there was never any aggression on Paul's end until this dude went to shove him. Wight's attorney argued during the own summation that his client's actions were justified. He's allowed to defend himself whether he's 7 foot tall or not. Davis said, size is just one factor in a confrontation like this. It's a very interesting thing, and I fully still, to this day, agree with the fact that, he was just defending himself. This happened in 2024 when you think about it. First of all, we'd have high-res video of every angle of this happening. But the other side of this is, if this happened in 2024, all of us would probably be like, yeah, we don't know if this dude had a fucking gun. It's Long Island. Long Island has turned into a haven for psychos anyway. How many serial killers have come off Long Island? But I think the self-defense would be even stronger if it happened in 2024. Plus, it wouldn't matter. I don't think it would have gone to court if there was video with audio. But if this happened in 2024, the internet probably would have tried to cancel Paul before it even went to trial. So anyway, it was wild. And so that year, that month, Paul, I think he had appeared and then he wasn't on TV for a month until the trial was settled. And then he was in the WWE up until whatever it was, like 4 or 5 years ago. And he spent, like 20 years in WWE. But that formed the friendship with him. And it's one that was pretty, I saw him a lot. I didn't take too much advantage of him, like in the way of, the free tickets. It was more like I would never ask him for tickets for stuff that I was going to buy, like pay-per-views. I would still want to sit front, try to get close to front as I could. But if I went to North Carolina or something, I didn't have tickets, I would just text him or call him and he would just hook it up. Coolest thing I think he ever got me tickets for was, I think it was Survivor Series, happened at Madison Square Garden, probably around 2003. And the way that they used to do the setup at Madison Square Garden, because it's an old arena, the walkway would be where they would come out center ice, the hockey teams. So it would be that same area. So they wouldn't have the grand walkway. It would be shorter, like an old school wrestling show. And he got us tickets for Survivor Series. He got me 6 or 4. I can't remember. And we were on the camera side. So that means we were next to where they came out. The camera was on us whenever anybody came out. And we were on TV like that whole night. I remember when I think he fought Brock Lesnar that night. And I remember that he as he was coming off after the match, he stopped and gave me a high five and recognized me in front of the whole fucking arena, which was really cool. And he was always sweet to me. He was always really nice. He always encouraged me to lose weight because back then I was like 275 pounds or something like that. And I hadn't seen him. I got out of wrestling probably around 2004. I think I saw him maybe a couple years after that in the UK. Yeah, that would have been like 2006 or 7, maybe a little bit later than that. And then I hadn't seen him for like 4 or 5 years, 6 years, something like that. We kept in touch. He follows me on Twitter, all that stuff, but I didn't see him. And then in 2014, I moved to Seattle, and I got introduced to this friend of mine now. He's a friend now, Greg, but Greg invites me. He's like, oh, one of our friends runs the like the meet and greet VIP for WWE, and so I got invited to go with them, like as if I bought the VIP package. We went into the arena early and got to see the ring and all that stuff. But then they do this like meet and greet backstage before the event. And they don't tell you who the wrestlers are going to be. They kind of just choose it that night. And it just so happened to be that they chose Paul. And so me, Greg, his wife Marie, and other friends were sitting in the back row in this like little backstage area, just listening to Paul talk about wrestling. And it was like a Q&A. Paul did not see me. He hadn't seen me in a while. I'd lost weight. I had a big beard and all that. So after he's done with the Q&A, like everybody just kind of lines up and you go shake hands and get signed photo with him and all that stuff. And so I was like, Greg, I'm like, let's just wait until all the way. Let's just get in the back of the line and like wait until the end. And so we waited, and Paul was like signing photos or something like that. And we get up to the table, and he's like, he's got his head down. I'm like, who's this fucking guy? And he looks up, he's like, what the fuck? And he was so shocked. He's like, when did you become a rabbi? Like he was joking about my beard, but we caught up real quick, and he's such a gracious person, and he's a funny guy. And he's like, I remember this guy. Like he starts talking to everybody that's there. He's like, I remember this guy when he was a fat, like a fat, pimply looking kid. And I'm like, yeah, this is true. This is somebody that at that point I had known for 15 years. And so it was really nice to catch up with him. I haven't seen him since then. I've talked to him briefly. He was in Seattle on his birthday, and I think they were in town for wrestling, and he said he got really sick, so he didn't even wrestle. But Paul brought me a lot of cool places and introduced me to a lot of cool people in those years that I was like going to a lot of events. I mean, between 97 and 2004, I probably went to 50 to 75 wrestling events, a lot of pay-per-views, couple WrestleManias, he was always so nice to me. Like they opened the WWF restaurant. It was, or whatever it was. I can't remember if they had changed the name yet, but they opened it up in Times Square sometime in the early 2000s. And Paul was going to be there to be like the person to open it and be the host that night. I believe that was the night that Disturbed also played. Anyway, so Paul's like, yeah, just come down to the restaurant. I'll get you in. You don't have to worry. He's like, I'm staying at the DoubleTree in Times Square, like it was down the street from the restaurant. And so I went to the hotel and met up with him. He's like, look, I'm sick. He's like, I can't do this. I'm actually going to go fly home. And he's like, Triple H is actually taking my place. And he was getting in his town car or whatever, limousine, I think they had him in. He's like, just hop in the car and I'll drop you off over there. And so he dropped me off over there and introduced me to the general manager of the restaurant. And me and my friend Derek, who was with me at the time, we got VIP treatment at the fucking restaurant, which included the general manager. She had asked me, she's like, oh, do you know Paul? And Paul is also Triple H's name. So she asked me if I knew that Paul. I said, you know what? I've actually never met him. She's like, don't worry about it. And so like halfway through the night, she's like, you guys come with me. And she brings us back to Triple H's dressing room and walks us right in. And Triple H is there. He was the heavyweight champion at the time, so he had the belt. He's like, hey guys, he's like, I'm Paul. I'm like, I'm Dave. This is Derek. He's like, yeah. He's like, and now talking about Paul Wight. He's like, yeah, Paul told me about what you did and being the witness for that court case. And He's just like, I really appreciate that. He really appreciates that. And so what was really interesting about that evening, and I got a photo with Triple H holding the belt, but I can't remember the general manager's name. She was really nice. She kept my name and my number. She's like, and she gave me hers. And she's like, look, she's like, if you're ever going to be coming to an event, just let me know ahead of time. We'll make sure you get in. It was like this weird, surreal life I led for a long time with this wrestling thing. And I got to know some other wrestlers and be friends, and never got any like job with the WWE, but I really wanted to. But it took me years to realize that I probably should have just been doing what I'm doing now. But yeah, that whole thing stems from just being in the wrong place or the right place at the wrong time, whatever you want to say. It was an amazing experience, and I did reach out to Paul to try and get him on the podcast, but I don't know if he even goes on Twitter anymore or checks his DMs. If he doesn't, I'm going to still try and reach out to him, because I think we could have a great conversation, not just about the incident, but about his career and all of the things he does and has done. And, he currently works for AEW, which is, they're better than WWE anyway. And they're more popular with like the people that I'm friends with. I think he's a talent scout, but he does a lot of stuff with them. He kind of can't wrestle anymore. He's had a couple of knee surgeries, and he's a huge nerd. He plays in a very famous D&D campaign with Joe Manganiello and Tom Morello and some other people. I think he still does work with the Special Olympics, and he's just a great guy with a very interesting life. I wanted to tell this story just because this is what this podcast is going to be. When it's episodes that is just me talking, I want to just share stories and the cool things. And some of it's for my own posterity. Some of it's for me to put this down, because in 10 years, I might forget some of the details of this stuff. And, I want to be able to go back and revisit my own memories as told by me. And wrestling was such a huge part of my life. Like I said, from when I was a kid, but the period of 97 through 2004. The last time I had really kept up with wrestling was WrestleMania 20, which was in New York City in 2004 at Madison Square Garden. It was just something about that was like, it signified the end of kind of like the Attitude Era, and it signified the end of me really keeping up with it. And I would pop in and out of it and see how some of my friends were doing and see how like some of the matches that get talked about. And I've watched some AEW in the last couple of years, but I don't think I'll ever be as into it as I was then. And that was a device of my own making, because I was going to all these events. But nothing compares to this whole story that I've told you, and being a part of this and being friends with somebody that is such a larger than life person. Like, people talk about how a lot of these guys are larger than life, right? Like Hogan, if you ever met him when he was a big guy, he was larger than life. Even Stone Cold, the first time I met him, The Rock was huge and larger than life. But, Paul's 7 foot, and, he's a giant. And it's like, wow. And he's an athlete too, which is, just on top of that, it's even more impressive. So, but yeah, that's the story. And there might be some details I'm forgetting, but nothing major. I don't think I got anything out of order or wrong. But memory's a tricky thing. I've written about stuff like this, and I probably have a lot of this written down in a blog post somewhere or a journal. But I was just kind of going off memory. I pulled out the articles. I just wanted to get my dates right. So I looked up the date of the Monday Night Nitro and the incident when it happened. But still have a lot of fond memories of that. And I have a lot of photos. I have like 3 photo albums with all these wrestlers. And I still have a lot of autographs, but I sold most of them off. I kept a lot of the personalized stuff, but it doesn't matter. The memories are really, that's all that matters. The physical stuff is all whatever, Yeah, so that's that. And I hope you enjoyed that story. This is, like I said, 100% factual. If you Google it and you watch the little news clips that you can find on YouTube or the Reddit posts that talk about it, they all get the one thing wrong. It didn't happen in the bar. It happened in the lobby right in front of the front desk. But that's it. Everything else pretty much is how it is in the media. But you are listening to somebody who was there when it happened and was part of it all the way through. And this, I want to say that I want to give a shout out to somebody that will never hear this, but I want to give a shout out to Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld's podcast, Robservations, he likes to recount stories that of all the things that happen in his life, and some of them don't even have to do with comics. And just kind of prompted me listening to his new episode today to I'm going to put down my first story in an episode. And I figured this one's a great one. I could have held this one, but I figure why not start the stories off with a bang, right? Like DDP said, bang. Anyway, yeah, thanks for listening to that. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode and listening. Before we go, do not shut that off. Do not shut that off. If you are not following me on YouTube, okay, you really need to. West Coast Davengers. It's comics based, but if you like me, you're going to like that no matter what. Or if you like Comic Tim. But more importantly, if you're not subscribed to this, please do. And if you are, there's one way that you can really help this podcast grow. Well, if you want to connect me with a person that I want to interview, that's one way. But the other way is to rate this podcast. On Spotify, it's the star rating. On Apple, there's a star rating, but you can also write a review. On YouTube, a like goes a long way, but a comment goes a longer way. All these little things, they just help. They're very nominal. You don't have to do much to do it, but they do help. And that's all that I really care about, is that I get this podcast to new ears. So whether you're into wrestling or not, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And I can't wait to tell some more stories that involve some fun incidents or things I was involved with. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week whenever you're listening to this. I hope you're well. And don't forget, let's get ready to rumble!